All right, in this video, we're going to look at Chapter 10, Section 3, still dealing with radicals and square roots and cube roots and things of that nature. Again, I highly recommend you read the e-text for Chapter 10, Section 3. Watch the videos that Pearson has posted for the section. This is just meant to be a little supplement and not a replacement. So let's start off multiplying with radicals. Well, as long as your base is the same, you just multiply the content. So we have the square root of 7 times the square root of 13. Where they're both the only square roots, we're going to keep it square root. And 7 times 13 is 91. So you get square root 91. Pretty simple. Next one, cube root of 3 times cube root of 10. We're dealing with cube roots, so we're going to stay with the cube root. And then multiply the contents. 3 times 10 is 30. Got one more dealing with some variables. Square root of 7x times the square root of 3y. Well, again, we're going to keep the square root and multiply the contents. 7 times 3 is 21. Then an x and a y. So that's all you have to do for those. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Just multiply the contents. Now let's look at going the other way. Let's look at simplifying radicals. So if I'm going to give you the square root of 28 and say simplify. If I say simplify, well, let's break this down. Let's see if we can break this down into a root that is a perfect square. So I can look at 28 and I can factor this. I can say this is the same as saying square root of 7 times the square root of 4. Because if you look at what we just did over here, we just did the opposite. We know that square root of 7 times the square root of 4 is the square root of 28. Well, let's take a look at what we have here. We have the square root of 4. Well, that square root of 4, that's going to be equal to 2. So we can simplify this and say it is 2 times the square root of 7. Again, that's why it's important to know your perfect squares and your perfect cubes, like I said in the last video. Make sure you know those so you can work with them a little bit. If I were to have the cube root of 48, let's see if we can break this down into something that's a cube root. Well, some factors of 48 are 6 and 8. So we could write this as the cube root of 8 times the cube root of 6. Well, the cube root of 8, if you know your cubes, the cube root of 8 is 2. So it's going to simplify to 2 times the cube root of 6. Now, one last thing I want to touch base on is working with variables and exponents. Now, if I were to say the square root of x to the 4th, well, let's break this down using our rules that we know. We can say x to the 4th is the same as saying x squared times x squared, right? Because remember, with multiplying with our exponents, 2 times 2 is 4. Now, the square root of x squared is simply x times x to give us x squared. Now let's try one with an odd exponent. Let's say we had the square root of x to the 5th. Well, this can be written as the square root of x to the 4th times the square root of x, because 4 and 1 is 5. Well, you know that this x to the 4th, we just solved this, is x squared. So this would be x squared times the square root of x. Keep that in mind as we do so. So let's dive into how about square root of x to the 7th, y to the 4th. Let's break this down. We can break this down. This x to the 7, let's break it down into an even number. We have x to the 6 times x times, and y to the 4th, we can break this down into y squared times y squared. Again, kind of like we did with the x here. Now let's break down every piece. Square root of x to the 6. X to the 6 is going to be, the square root of x to the 6 is just x to the 3rd. If you have an even number in your root, just divide it by 2. Now we have square root of x is still left there. Now the square root of y squared is y, and the square root of y squared is y. So let's clean this up a little bit. We have x cubed times y is y squared times the square root of x, and that's your answer in simplest form. Again, please read the chapters and the section. Please watch the videos that Pearson has. This is made to be a supplement, but email me if you have any questions.